The stars of the Aelorian sector glittered quietly, but peace had long since abandoned that region of space. On the borders of the Aelorian Alliance, where shining cities once traded songs, art, and knowledge, there now burned only wreckage. The Krith swarm had come without warning, descending upon worlds like a tide of darkness. The Krith were relentless. They did not negotiate. They did not pause. Their ships came in endless numbers, black spires bristling with weaponry. Each battle left another system silent. Whole colonies had been stripped of life within days. Against such merciless force, the Aelorian Alliance, made of many gentle and intellectual species, could barely defend themselves. On the capital world, GalacticPrime, the High Council gathered inside their crystalline hall. Tall windows looked out across the city, where lights flickered under the shadow of fear. The councilors' voices were filled with tension as they debated their last chance of survival. Councilor Thalon, his silver crest dimmed with worry, spoke first. "We have lost 9 fleets in 3 weeks. The Krith do not tire. They will not stop until every one of our worlds is dust. Our defenses crumble." Another voice, softer but urgent, joined him. Councilor Ashira, with her long, luminous tendrils, trembled as she addressed the others. "We have only one option left. We must call for reinforcements. We must beg for aid beyond our borders to any who will listen." The chamber fell into heavy silence. They all knew how unlikely it was. The Alliance had many friends, but few had the strength or the courage to face the swarm. Still, there was no choice. The message was prepared, a desperate plea sent on every frequency, every channel that might carry it across the stars. "This is the Aelorian Alliance High Council. We are under attack by the Krith swarm. Our fleets fall, our people perish. We request immediate reinforcements. Any who hear this, any who value freedom and life, please answer our call." The signal was cast into the void. And then the waiting began. Days passed, each one bringing worse news. Star systems fell. Refugees flooded into the heart worlds. The High Council watched the reports in despair. Perhaps no one would come. Perhaps the galaxy would remain silent while the Alliance burned. Then on the 5th day, a reply arrived. It came not with the refined elegance of Aelorian communications, nor the precise diplomatic tones of allied species. It came as a rough, direct voice spoken in accented but clear galactic standard. "This is Task Group 7, Terran Expeditionary Force. We received your distress call. Reinforcements inbound. Prepare coordinates for link-up." The counselors looked at one another in confusion. "Terrans?" Ashira whispered, her tendrils quivering. "Humans from the Deathworld?" The name was half legend in the Alliance. Earth Terra was a world spoken of with both awe and fear. Its gravity was heavy, its climate violent, its ecosystems filled with predators and poisons. Even its skies were storm-torn and unpredictable. How intelligent life had survived there was a mystery, but the fact that humans had not only survived but thrived had spread rumors through the stars. The Aelorians had never fought beside humans. Few had even met them, and yet it was humans who had answered the call. When the fleet arrived, the Alliance was surprised. The Aelorian fleets were made of smooth, crystal-lined vessels, graceful arcs of design that emphasized stability and elegance. The humans' ships were nothing like this. They looked rough, almost brutal, massive hulls of steel and alloy scarred by past battles. They were bristling with weapons, thick armor plating, and improvised reinforcements welded onto their frames. Where Aelorian vessels glided, Terran ships looked like predators crouched for the kill. Councilor Thalon watched from the command station as the human flagship appeared. "These are reinforcements?" His voice carried doubt. From the flagship came a message. "Alliance Command. This is Captain Marcus Hale of the United Terran Fleet. We are here to assist." The humans requested immediate coordinates for the front. They wasted no time with ceremony. While Aelorian commanders often debated strategies for hours, the humans demanded data on enemy strength and movements within minutes. Their efficiency was startling. The first meeting between the two sides took place on GalacticPrime, within a fortified hangar. The Aelorian High Council came to greet them, expecting perhaps polished diplomats. Instead, the humans arrived in armored uniforms, their boots heavy on the crystal floor. They looked strong, broad-shouldered, their movements steady and deliberate. The air around them seemed charged with a restless energy. Captain Hale stepped forward, a tall man with sharp eyes. His uniform was plain but well kept, his posture relaxed yet commanding. He bowed slightly. Not the deep, elegant gestures of Aelorian tradition, but a short, practical nod. "Counselors," he said simply. "You called for reinforcements." "We came." Counselor Ashira's voice trembled with polite caution. "We are grateful, Captain. But I can't forgive my directness. We had expected reinforcements of a different nature. Our allies from the core, or the Veyron fleets." Hale's lips curved in the faintest of smiles. "Seems we got here first. I wouldn't put too much hope in the core. They prefer clean wars with clean victories. That's not this kind of fight." The counselors exchanged glances, unsettled. The humans spoke of war as if it were nothing new, nothing shocking. To the Aelorians, war was horror. To the humans, it seemed familiar. The real test came soon enough. Scouts reported that the Krith were advancing on Devara, an outer alliance colony. If it fell, the road to the core systems would lie open. The Aelorian fleet prepared to defend the system. The humans insisted on joining. On the command deck of the flagship, Captain Hale briefed his officers. "The Krith rely on overwhelming force. They expect their enemies to hold formation and get crushed. That won't work with us. We'll cut into them, hit their supply lines, and keep moving. Fast strikes. No mercy." An Aelorian liaison objected immediately. "That is reckless. Our fleets cannot survive direct engagement at such close quarters." Hale's eyes hardened. "Your fleets don't have to. Ours will take the front. You cover us from range. Trust me, Counselor. We've been fighting to survive since the first day of our species. We know what we're doing." The Battle of Devara began 3 days later. The Krith swarm descended in black waves of ships, their weapons carving across the void. The Aelorian fleet, elegant but fragile, held its defensive lines. Against such numbers, they would have been broken in hours, but the humans did not hold the line. They charged. The Terran ships hurled themselves into the swarm, weaving through enemy fire with reckless speed. Missiles streaked out in salvos, tearing gaps into the Krith formations. Where the Aelorians hesitated, the humans pressed forward. They fought as if the void itself belonged to them, as if danger were nothing but a familiar companion. On the command deck of the Aelorian flagship, Counselor Thalen stared in shock. "They are mad. No species should fight like this. They cannot survive such chaos, yet survive they did. More than that, they thrived." The humans turned every weakness of the Krith into a weapon against them. When the Krith tried to swarm one ship, another would crash in from the side, ripping through their formation. When the Krith tried to surround them, the humans broke free with sheer aggression. For the first time in weeks, the Krith swarm faltered, and when the battle ended, Devara still stood, back on Aloria Prime. The council met again with Captain Hale. Counselor Ashira studied him with wide eyes. "Your people, they fight without fear." Hale shook his head. "Not without fear, with fear. But we don't let it stop us. On our world, everything is dangerous. We learn to survive by fighting back. That's what we bring to your war, not elegance, not safety. Just survival." The counselors said nothing. They understood now why legends called Earth a death world, and they understood, perhaps for the first time, what it meant to have Deathworlders as allies. The message was clear. The Alliance had called for reinforcements. What they got was something else entirely. They got humanity. They got Deathworlders. The news of Devara's survival spread quickly through the Aelorian Alliance. For the first time in months, there was a story of hope, not loss. Citizens gathered in crystal squares, listening to the broadcast with wide eyes. Some wept with relief. Others whispered in awe at the strange warriors who had come from the far side of the galaxy. "Humans," they said. "Deathworlders." Yet not everyone was convinced. Hope was fragile, and legends of humans were mixed with fear. Could such unpredictable beings truly be allies? Or would their reckless nature bring disaster just as easily as victory? The aftermath of Devara on the Aelorian flagship Celestara. Counselor Thalen studied the battle reports. The numbers were astonishing. Against overwhelming odds, the human task group had destroyed twice as many Krith ships as they had lost. Their losses, while real, were far lighter than the Council had predicted. "They should not have survived," Thalen murmured. His silver crest shifted uneasily. "And yet they did more than survive. They changed the battle." Counselor Ashira's luminous tendrils glowed faintly as she listened. She was quieter than Thalen, but her thoughts were sharper. Perhaps that is the nature of Deathworlders. They are not bound by the same fears that guide us. Still, doubt gnawed at her. She had seen their methods. Bold, reckless charges. A refusal to retreat. tactics that seemed almost suicidal. Could such ways be trusted in a long war? Her answer came soon enough. Meeting the humans again. A formal meeting was arranged in one of HFY's fortified halls. The crystal walls glittered in the light, casting calm reflections. The Elorian Council sat in a wide arc, waiting for their new allies to arrive. When the humans entered, the room changed. They did not walk with the graceful steps of Elorians or the careful poise of diplomats. Their boots struck the floor firmly, their eyes scanning the room with quiet alertness. They carried themselves not as guests but as soldiers. Captain Marcus Hale led them. Beside him walked Commander Elena Ruiz, his second-in-command, and several other officers. Their uniforms bore patches, burns, and scars from countless missions. Nothing about them was polished. Everything about them was practical. Hale gave a short nod. Counselors. The Elorians bowed, their movements slow and ceremonial. Hale did not imitate the gesture. He simply stood, calm and steady. Counselor Ashira spoke first. Captain Hale, your actions at Devara saved countless lives. For that we are grateful. Hale inclined his head slightly. We came because you asked for help. We don't leave allies to burn. Not if we can stop it. The counselor shifted uneasily. His words were direct, lacking the careful phrases of diplomacy. But there was no mistaking the sincerity behind them. The lesson of fear. The discussion turned quickly to strategy. The Krith were regrouping, and another assault was certain. The Elorian commanders wanted to strengthen their defenses to build larger shields around the inner worlds and wait. Hale disagreed. Defensive walls won't stop the swarm. They'll just keep pressing until you collapse. We need to move. Strike first. Hit their supply lines. Make them bleed. Counselor Thalen frowned deeply. That is madness. To attack the swarm head-on is to invite destruction. Hale's sharp eyes fixed on him. Madness is waiting while they eat you alive. On Earth, if you hide, you die. If you fight, maybe you live. That's the difference. The room fell silent. Even those who disagreed could not deny the truth in his tone. Commander Ruiz leaned forward. Her voice was softer but no less firm. Fear is natural. We feel it too. But fear doesn't have to mean weakness. On our world, fear keeps us sharp. It teaches us to adapt. That's how we survived a planet that tried to kill us every single day. Ashira's tendrils curled with unease, but also with curiosity. She whispered almost to herself, a world that tried to kill you. And yet you learned from it, Ruiz nodded. Every storm, every predator, every danger. We learned or we died. That's why we fight the way we do. That's why we don't break when the odds are against us. For the first time, the Council began to understand. The humans' recklessness was not foolishness, it was survival, sharpened into instinct. Training the Alliance, the humans did not wait for endless debate. They began working with Elorian forces immediately. In training yards and simulators, they drilled soldiers in new methods. An Elorian pilot complained after one exhausting session. Your maneuvers are impossible. No sane pilot would throw their ship into such danger. The human instructor, a scarred veteran named Sergeant Miller, grinned. That's the point. The Krith expect you to fly safe. If you do what they expect, you're already dead. Surprise them. Be unpredictable. That's how you win. At first, the Elorians resisted. Their culture prized balance, harmony, and careful calculation. But slowly, they began to see results. Exercises once dominated by Krith-like simulations began to shift. With human tactics, they found weaknesses in the enemy's patterns. Fear was still there. But now there was also courage. The first joint mission. The true test came when reports arrived of a Krith raiding party attacking the mining colony of Vera's Reach. Normally, such a raid would mean destruction. But this time, humans and Elorians would go together. The Terran ships led the charge, diving into the raiders with the same reckless speed as before. But now Elorian ships followed, not holding back, not hiding, but striking alongside them. In the chaos of battle, an Elorian squadron found itself cornered. Krith fighters closed in from all sides. Panic surged through the pilots. Then a human voice crackled through the comms. Hold steady. Watch your timing. 3, 2, 1. Now! On cue, the Elorians broke formation, scattering in directions that seemed suicidal. The Krith swarmed after them, straight into the path of Terran missiles. The swarm exploded in fire. The Elorian pilots were stunned. They had survived what should have been their end. When the battle was over, Vera's Reach still stood. For the second time, the swarm had been denied. Changing hearts back on Aloria Prime, word of the victory spread. Citizens who once doubted the humans began to cheer their names. Children carved images of Terran ships into crystal. Songs were written of their reckless courage. But among the council, opinions remained divided. Councillor Thalen argued, "We cannot abandon our traditions. Their ways are too dangerous. If we follow them too closely, we may lose ourselves." Ishira, however, felt differently. She had watched the humans closely, not just in battle but in moments of quiet. She had seen them laugh together even after loss, seen them share food with refugees, seen them repair ships with their own hands instead of waiting for drones. "They are not like us," she said softly, "but perhaps that is why we need them. We cannot survive this war by being who we were. We must learn to be more, and they can teach us how." The rumors of Deathworlders outside the council chambers whispers spread across the galaxy. Other species began to hear of the humans. Traders told stories in spaceports. Refugees carried tales of reckless ships that fought where no one else dared. "They are from a death world," the whispers said. "A planet where storms tear the skies, where beasts stalk the forests, where even the ground itself is dangerous." And yet they lived. They thrived. And now they bring that will to survive to the stars. To some, the stories brought fear. To others, hope. But to the Krith, the stories brought something else entirely. Uncertainty. For the first time, the swarm hesitated. For the first time, they faced prey that did not run. A quiet moment late one night after long meetings, Councillor Ishira found herself speaking privately with Captain Hale. They stood on a balcony overlooking the city. The crystal towers shimmered faintly under the starlight. "Captain," Ishira said softly, "why did you come? Truly. There are many who would have ignored our call." Hale was quiet for a long time. Then he spoke, his voice low. "Because we know what it's like to be alone, to fight with no one coming. On Earth, we learned early that survival is never guaranteed. But if someone calls for help and you can answer, you do. Because tomorrow it might be you calling." Ishira studied him with wide, thoughtful eyes. For the first time, she saw not only the warrior, but the human beneath. A being who had chosen to fight, not out of glory, but out of solidarity. Perhaps that was what made them different. Not just their survival, but their refusal to let others face the dark alone. The Alliance had called for reinforcements. What they received were humans, Deathworlders, who fought with fear in their hearts but refused to yield. And slowly, the Alorian Alliance began to change. The victory at Vera's Reach gave the Alorian Alliance something they had not felt in months: hope. Yet hope was fragile, like crystal glass under pressure. The Krith swarm remained vast, unending, and merciless. One battle could not change the balance of the war. Still, something had shifted. The Alorians had seen the humans fight. They had fought alongside them. And now the High Council faced a choice: continue the old ways of caution, or take the dangerous path the Deathworlders offered. Doubt and debate inside the shining council chamber. Tension filled the air. Holographic projections of star maps hovered in the center, showing the spread of the swarm. Red marks crept closer to the Alorian core worlds each week. Councillor Thalen slammed his hand against the table, his silver crest trembling. "We cannot continue this madness. These humans fight like wild beasts. They throw themselves into danger without thought. One mistake and they will drag us into ruin." Across the table, Councillor Ishira's tendrils glowed softly, yet her voice was firm. "And yet without them, Vera's Reach would be ashes. Without them, Devara would be gone. You cannot deny the results." Other councillors murmured, torn between fear and gratitude. At last, Captain Marcus Hale, standing at the edge of the chamber, spoke. His words cut through the debate like a blade. "Your defenses will not hold. If you keep waiting, you will lose everything. The Krith know how you fight. They know you hide behind shields and formations. They will keep pressing until you break. You need a new way. That's why we're here." Thalen's eyes narrowed. "A new way? You mean your reckless way?" Hale met his gaze calmly. "I mean survival." Seeds of change. While the council argued, the humans acted. In training halls across Aloria Prime, human instructors worked with Alorian soldiers. They taught them not to cling to rigid formations, but to adapt. They showed pilots how to use asteroids as cover, how to lure enemies into ambushes, how to feign weakness to bait a strike. At first, the Alorians resisted. Their culture had long prized precision, harmony, and careful coordination. To act with chaos felt wrong, even dishonorable, but the humans pushed them. One day, Sergeant Miller faced a group of young Aelorian recruits. Their movements were too smooth, too predictable. He shook his head. You're thinking about beauty. War isn't beautiful. War is dirty. You want to survive? Forget elegance. Think like your enemy, then hit them where they least expect. The recruits hesitated, but slowly, painfully, they began to learn a human strategy. The turning point came when human scouts uncovered a Krith staging ground in the Zerath Belt, a cluster of asteroids where the swarm stored supplies and bred new drones. To the Aelorian Council, the idea of attacking it was unthinkable, too deep into enemy lines, too dangerous. But to the humans, it was the perfect target. Captain Hale gathered his officers and several Aelorian commanders around a holographic table. The asteroid field glowed red on the display. The swarm thinks you'll never strike here. That's why it's vulnerable. If we cut their supplies, their advance slows. We hit them where it hurts. An Aelorian commander shook his head. We could never navigate those fields. Our ships would be destroyed before reaching the target. Hale's lips curved in a faint smile. Ours won't. We grew up dodging storms and flying through danger. We'll lead. You follow. The plan was set. Reluctantly, the Aelorian fleet agreed. Into the belt, the mission began under a veil of silence. The Terran ships entered the asteroid field first, weaving between rocks the size of cities. Their engines burned bright, but their movements were sharp, controlled. The Aelorian ships followed, nervous but determined. More than once they nearly crashed against drifting stone, but the humans guided them with calm precision. Inside the field, Krith patrols lurked. The swarm's ships were swift and merciless. Yet the humans used the very chaos of the asteroids as cover. A Terran cruiser drifted into the shadow of a massive rock, powered down, waiting until the Krith patrol passed. Then with sudden violence, it burst from hiding, unleashing a storm of missiles. The Krith were torn apart before they even realized the trap. The Aelorian crews watched in awe. This was not war as they knew it. It was something sharper, something unpredictable. The ambush deeper into the belt, the combined fleet reached the staging ground. Krith ships swarmed around massive bioorganic stations pulsing with unnatural light. The Aelorian commanders hesitated. We should fall back. This force is too great, but Hale gave the order. Strike now, the humans charged. Their ships darted through the swarm, firing relentlessly. The Aelorians, inspired by their allies, followed. The battle was chaos. Explosions lit the asteroids, fragments spinning wildly through the void. Yet amid the storm, the humans thrived. They turned every asteroid into a shield, every gap into an ambush point. At one critical moment, an Aelorian frigate was caught by a Krith destroyer. Its shields flickered, ready to fail. Then a Terran corvette slammed into the destroyer's flank, guns blazing. The Krith ship shattered. The Aelorian frigate was saved. For the first time, the Aelorians felt the power of fighting like Deathworlders. Reckless, yes, but effective. Fire and stone. The battle raged for hours. One by one, the Krith stations fell, torn apart by missiles and plasma fire. At last, the largest supply hive erupted in flames, its organic structure collapsing into the void. The swarm reeled. Their advance into Aelorian space would falter without supplies. For the first time in memory, the Krith had been struck where they were weakest. As the fleet retreated from the belt, the humans cheered openly, pounding each other on the shoulders. The Aelorians did not cheer, but in their hearts something shifted. They had fought not as prey, but as hunters. And they had survived. Shifting perspectives back on Aeloria Prime, the Council gathered once more. Reports confirmed the Krith retreat. For the first time in months, the swarm had lost ground. Thalen still looked uneasy, but his words carried less weight now. Their ways are dangerous, but I cannot deny the results. Ashira's voice was soft but steady. Perhaps danger is what we need. Perhaps survival is not about safety, but about courage. Even those who had doubted now began to wonder. Could it be that the humans' unorthodox ways were not madness, but wisdom, born from a harsh world? Rumors among the swarm unseen by the Alliance, the Krith themselves began to whisper, if such creatures could whisper. Among their hive, fear was rare, but the humans had done what no prey had done before. They had struck first. They had broken supply lines. They had refused to die. The swarm's overmind studied this new enemy with unease. Prey was not meant to fight this way. Prey was not meant to bite back. The humans were different. A glimpse of humanity. In the days after the victory, Elorian citizens watched the humans more closely. They saw them not only as warriors, but as people. Children crowded near docking bays to glimpse the rugged Terran soldiers. Merchants shared food and goods with them. Slowly, fear turned into curiosity. One evening, Counselor Ashira visited the human barracks. She found Captain Hale repairing equipment with his own hands, grease staining his uniform. Around him, his crew laughed and argued, sharing stories of storms, mountains, and oceans from their homeworld. Ashira listened quietly. She saw something in them she had not expected. Not only strength, but warmth. They fought fiercely, but they also cared deeply. They carried their strange Deathworld spirit not only into war, but into life. She returned to the council chambers with new resolve. They are not only fighters. They are more. If we are to survive, we must learn from them. Not just their tactics, but their spirit. The lesson of the Deathworld. The Alliance had asked for reinforcements. They had expected fleets of familiar allies, cautious and predictable. Instead, they had received humans, Deathworlders who fought in ways no one else dared. And though fear remained, though doubt lingered, one truth had become clear. The humans were not here to follow the Alliance's ways. They were here to change them, and in that change lay the only hope of survival. The destruction of the Krith supply stations in the Zirath Belt sent shockwaves through the war. For the first time since the invasion began, the swarm had faltered. The Elorian Alliance no longer whispered only of defeat. They whispered of survival. They whispered of hope. But the war was far from won. The Krith, enraged by their losses, turned their fury toward NetNarrator, a fertile world that supplied half the Alliance's food reserves. If Netnarrator fell, millions would starve, and the Alliance would collapse. The battle for NetNarrator would decide everything. Gathering for war on the command deck of the Terran flagship Iron Resolve, Captain Marcus Hale studied the tactical display. Red markers filled the star map, showing the sheer size of the Krith fleet moving toward Netnarrator. It was larger than anything the Alliance had faced before. Commander Elena Ruiz stood at his side, her brow furrowed. "They're throwing everything at us," Hale nodded. "They want to break the Alliance once and for all. If they take Netnarrator, they'll choke the rest of your people into surrender." Across the table, Counselor Ashira and several Aelorian commanders watched with growing dread. The Krith fleet outnumbered them 5-1. Even with the humans' help, the odds were nearly impossible. Ashira's voice trembled, though she tried to steady it. "Captain Hale, can we truly stand against such numbers?" Hale's gaze was calm, almost steady in defiance of the storm ahead. "We don't need to match them ship for ship. We just need to break them, and to do that we'll use their strength against them." The plan Hale outlined his strategy. The humans would form the spearhead, drawing the swarm into tight formations. The Aelorian fleet would strike from hidden positions, ambushing the enemy where they were weakest. Together they would turn the swarm's hunger for overwhelming force into chaos. It was bold. It was dangerous. And it was their only chance. Some Aelorian commanders hesitated. Counselor Thalen's voice was heavy with doubt. "If even one part of this plan fails, we will lose everything." "It is madness." Hale's response was quiet but firm. "Survival often looks like madness to those who've only known peace. But I promise you this. If we stand together, we can hold Netnarrator." At last, Ashira leaned forward, her tendrils glowing faintly with resolve. "Then let us fight as they fight. Let us learn to be more than we were." The decision was made. The arrival of the swarm, the sky above NetNarrator darkened as the Krith arrived. Thousands of ships blotted out the stars, their spires glowing with unnatural light. The swarm descended like a storm of shadows, their war cries echoing across every comm channel. On the surface, civilians rushed into shelters as defense towers came alive. Farmers abandoned their fields. Children clutched their parents' hands, whispering prayers. All eyes turned to the heavens. Would the Alliance hold? The battle begins. The Terran fleet moved first. With engines burning bright, they hurled themselves into the swarm. Missiles streaked across the void, tearing into the first wave of Krith ships. The Krith answered with fury. Beams of fire and swarms of drones filled space with deadly light. Human ships shook under the impact, but they did not break. They pressed forward, fighting as though survival itself demanded it, which it did. Behind them, the Elorian fleet struck from hiding. Crystal warships emerged from the shadow of Neuralis's moons, unleashing volleys into the Krith's flanks. The swarm staggered under the surprise attack. For the first time in the war, the Alliance did not run. They did not hide. They struck. The line holds the battle raged for hours. The void was filled with fire and wreckage. Terran ships dove into impossible situations, tearing gaps into enemy lines. Elorian vessels followed, using their precision weapons to carve apart exposed targets. Yet the Krith were endless. For every swarm destroyed, another pressed forward. Slowly, painfully, the Alliance line began to bend. On the Iron Resolve, alarms blared. Commander Rui shouted over the noise. "Shields failing on the port side." Hale gripped the console tightly, his eyes locked on the tactical display. "Hold the line. If we break now, Neuralis is lost." Across the fleet, human and Elorian crews fought side by side, refusing to surrender. Ships burned. Crews screamed through comms, but still they held. A moment of desperation, hours into the fight, the Krith unleashed their largest assault yet. Massive dreadnoughts, dark as night, pushed forward with swarms at their sides. Their weapons tore through Alliance ships like paper. Counselor Thalen, watching from the Celestara, nearly collapsed in despair. "It is over," he whispered. "We cannot stop them." But Ashira's eyes burned with determination. She pointed at the humans on the display, still fighting, still charging even when outnumbered. "Look at them, Thalen. They do not stop. Neither must we." Her words spread through the comm channels. Elorian captains, once hesitant, rallied their crews. They fought harder, fiercer than ever before. The turning point Captain Hale saw the moment clearly. The swarm was pressing too hard, too fast. Their formation was stretched thin, their rear exposed. "This is it," he growled. "All ships, follow me!" Strike their heart. The Terran fleet surged forward, slamming into the center of the Krith armada. Missiles exploded in blinding waves. Plasma fire ripped through enemy hulls. The Elorians, emboldened, joined the charge. Together they pierced the heart of the swarm. For the first time, the Krith faltered. Their endless advance wavered. Confusion spread among their ships. The hunters had become the hunted. The battle on the ground. While the fleets clashed above, the Krith landed ground forces on Neuralis. Fast insectoid warriors poured across the fields, tearing through defenses. Terran Marines and Elorian soldiers fought side by side in the dirt and ash. Human soldiers, hardened by years of surviving their own hostile world, led counterattacks through forests and mountains. One Elorian soldier, trembling with fear, asked a human sergeant, "How do you keep fighting when death is everywhere?" The sergeant's reply was simple. "Because stopping means death too. So we move forward. Always forward." The word spread among the Elorian troops like fire. They fought harder, not because they were unafraid, but because they had learned what it meant to keep moving even in fear. Fire in the sky back in orbit, the battle reached its peak. The Iron Resolve was battered, its hull torn open in places, but it still fought. Hale refused to retreat. The Krith dreadnoughts loomed ahead, their weapons charging for a final devastating strike. "Target their cores," Hale barked. "All ships concentrate fire." Missiles, beams, and plasma blasts tore into the dreadnoughts. One by one, the massive ships cracked, their black spires shattering into flame. When the largest of them exploded in a blinding fireball, the swarm's advance finally broke. The Krith ships faltered, then began to retreat. Cheers erupted across Alliance comms. For the first time in months, the swarm was not victorious. Aftermath. The battlefield was a graveyard of wreckage and flame. Thousands of ships drifted, broken, but Neuralis still stood. On the surface, survivors emerged from shelters to see the skies clear. Farmers wept in their ruined fields. Children pointed at the Terran ships with awe. The Alliance had held. On the Celestara, Counselor Thalen bowed his head. "I was wrong. The humans, the Deathworlders, they have given us a chance." Ashira's tendrils glowed with quiet pride. "No, they did not give it to us alone. They taught us to find it ourselves. They taught us to fight. The legacy of the battle across the galaxy. Word spread of the Battle of Neuralis Prime. The Elorian Alliance had not only survived, but struck back. And at the heart of the victory were the humans, Deathworlders who refused to surrender. To the swarm, they were no longer prey. They were predators. To the Alliance, they were no longer strangers. They were comrades. And to the galaxy, they were something new. a force that would not yield no matter the odds. The Alliance had asked for reinforcements. What they got were humans. What they got were Deathworlders. The battle for NetNarrator had ended. The Krith swarm had been repelled, their vast armada broken and retreating into the darkness of space. Smoke still drifted across the planet's surface and debris floated among the stars, but the Alliance had survived. Not just survived, they had won. The victory was not merely in the destruction of the enemy fleet. It was in the spirit it had sparked among the Alorian Alliance. For the first time in generations, fear was not the guiding force. Hope was, courage was, and at the center of it all were the humans, Deathworlders who had transformed the way the Alliance fought. Returning heroes on the crystal terraces of Aloria Prime, citizens gathered to welcome the returning fleets. Terran and Alorian ships glinted in the morning light, scarred but intact. Children ran to the docking bays, waving makeshift banners. Traders shouted greetings, offering supplies and gifts. And among the people, the humans walked with quiet pride, their rugged forms contrasting sharply with the elegant Alorians around them. Captain Marcus Hale stood on the steps of the Terran flagship Iron Resolve, watching the crowd. Beside him, Commander Elena Ruiz smiled faintly. "They're not afraid of us anymore," she said. Hale nodded. "They never were. They just didn't know us yet." For the humans, the celebration was different. They did not seek glory. They had come to fight, to survive, and to help those who could not face the darkness alone. Yet they had earned more than victory. They had earned trust, respect, and a place in the stories of the Alliance. Lessons learned. Inside the High Council chambers, the leaders gathered once more. The room was quiet, almost solemn, as reports of the battle were presented. Counselor Thalen spoke first, his usual doubt softened by humility. "I feared their ways, their recklessness, and yet I see now that their courage, their refusal to surrender, has saved more lives than any caution could have." Ishira's glow was bright, almost radiant. "They have taught us a new way to fight, not with fear, not with hesitation, but with courage and adaptability. That is the true gift they have given us." Hale, standing at the edge of the chamber, spoke simply. "You asked for reinforcements, we came. But you didn't just need ships or weapons, you needed willpower. We fight differently because we have no choice but to survive. You can do the same if you choose." The counselors nodded slowly. They had learned that survival was not only about strategy. It was about spirit. It was about refusing to break even when all hope seemed lost. Rebuilding the Alliance. In the weeks after the battle, the Alorian Alliance worked tirelessly to repair the damage. Cities were rebuilt, fleets restored, and food supplies replenished. But more importantly, a new mindset spread across the galaxy. Alorian soldiers trained alongside humans, learning their unorthodox strategies, their instincts, their courage in the face of impossible odds. Pilots practiced daring maneuvers, ground troops learned rapid improvisation, and commanders studied how to think beyond traditional tactics. Even the civilians were touched by the humans' influence. Communities became more resilient, ready to face challenges not only from war but from the harshness of life itself. The Deathworlders had left their mark not just on the battlefield, but in the hearts and minds of everyone who had fought beside them. The Krith retreat far from the Alliance. The Krith swarm reeled from the losses at NetNarrator Prime. Their overminds, ancient and calculating, could not comprehend the humans' tactics. Their attacks had been repelled repeatedly, their supply lines destroyed, their advance into Alliance space stalled. For the first time, doubt entered the swarm. The overminds realized that the prey they once considered weak were no longer defenseless. The humans, those strange beings from a harsh, unforgiving world, had introduced chaos the Krith could not predict. Whispers of the Deathworlders began to spread among Krith ranks. Fear, rare and foreign, settled over parts of their swarm. The creatures that had once known only conquest now hesitated, unsure how to face opponents who refused to die. Bonds forged in battle. As the weeks turned to months, the humans and the Alorians worked closely together. Trust deepened with each mission, each exercise, each shared victory and loss. Hale and Ruiz became familiar figures on Aloria Prime. They shared stories of Earth, storms, mountains, predators, and survival against impossible odds. The Alorians listened with fascination, learning not just tactics but philosophy, The value of resilience, of refusing to surrender, of standing firm in the face of fear. One evening, Hale spoke to a group of young Alorian recruits. You will face danger. You will face enemies that seem unbeatable, but you have something stronger than numbers or weapons. You have your will. If you refuse to break, nothing can defeat you. The recruits nodded, inspired not just by his words but by the example of the humans themselves. A world-transformed life on Neuralis Prime began to recover. Fields once trampled by battle slowly flourished again. Rivers ran clear, forests grew tall, and cities gleamed under the twin suns. But the scars of war remained. The Alliance did not forget the lesson of the Krith. They remained vigilant, but they were no longer paralyzed by fear. They had seen the humans' courage firsthand. They had learned that survival required more than shields and formations. It required boldness, adaptability, and unity. The Deathworlders' influence spread across the galaxy. Other species began to respect humans, not just as soldiers but as teachers, as allies, as living proof that life could thrive in even the harshest conditions. The human legacy Captain Hale watched from the Iron Resolve as the Alliance celebrated. He did not seek titles or glory, yet he felt something deeper, the quiet satisfaction of knowing that his people had helped others survive. Commander Ruiz stood beside him, scanning the horizon. They will remember this, she said. The Alliance will carry our lessons forward. Hale nodded. They will. But it is not about memory. It is about spirit. If they take the courage we showed here and make it their own, then the Alliance will never fall, no matter what the Krith throw at them next. The humans had come to fight. They had come to survive, and in doing so, they had given the Alliance something even greater, the will to endure, the courage to stand, and the knowledge that even in darkness, life could prevail. The galaxy speak stories of the humans spread quickly. Traders in distant sectors told tales of the strange warriors from Earth who fought like nothing else. Scholars recorded their methods. Poets wrote songs of their courage. Even the Krith from the dark corners of their hive worlds spoke in hushed tones of the Deathworlders who would not die. The legend grew. Humans were not just reinforcements. They were forces of nature, shaped by the harshness of their home planet, tempered by struggle and willing to face the impossible. They were the Deathworlders, the ones who changed the course of a war in the hearts of an entire galaxy. A final reflection. Late one night, Ishira stood on the balcony of the High Council Palace, gazing at the stars. The humans moved among the Alliance citizens, quietly repairing ships, sharing stories, and teaching new tactics. They are remarkable, she whispered, not only for their skill, but for their spirit. They have shown us what it means to truly survive, and to help others survive with you. Counselor Thalen, standing nearby, nodded slowly. We asked for reinforcements, and we received something far more powerful. They have taught us that survival is not just about shields and weapons. It is about courage, unity, and refusing to give up. Ishira smiled faintly. They came from a death world. But perhaps the real lesson is this. Every world, every being has the power to endure if it refuses to break. And now, so do we. A new dawn as the suns rose over Aloria Prime, the galaxy seemed brighter. The Krith had been pushed back. The Alliance had survived. And humans, the Deathworlders, had left an indelible mark. Where once fear had ruled, now courage reigned. Where once the Alliance had relied on careful caution, now they embraced adaptability and boldness. And in the hearts of all who fought, a quiet truth settled. Humanity had arrived. Not just as reinforcements, but as a beacon of hope and a symbol of the will to survive. The galaxy would never forget the battle. And the Alliance would never forget the lesson of the Deathworlders. They had asked for help, and what they received was far greater than any ship, any weapon, any fleet. They had received humanity. They had received the Deathworlders.